What is up, amigos? So Season 2 Season of Blood has been live for 4 days now, and I've been grinding as much as I can to get leveled up to showcase some things. Now, it is going slower than I would have liked, but that doesn't mean I can't update my old guides for you all. And the first one I wanted to update was my Poison Rogue. This is still one of the best, if not the best build in the entire game. Poison Rogues are incredibly strong, even stronger in Season 2, I would think. And because of this, we have reworked the entire Paragon tree to target more resistances plus damage reductions to mitigate some of those changes that occurred over the last 2 seasons. Plus, we take less crit damage and vulnerable damage, as these aren't as impactful anymore because of the bucket changes they made this season. If you haven't had the chance to play yet, everyone, when it comes to vulnerable damage, does X 20% damage to vulnerable targets, and all extra vulnerable damage you apply in your build from affixes or talents are now additive, and they're not in their own multiplicative bucket anymore. Now, also, while we're on the topic of changes, let me just say resistances are definitely working, and the changes to elemental damage from enemies in Diablo 4 have impacted the rogue survivability a little bit, but nothing we can't handle and fix. We just have to adapt to it. If I had to recommend to anybody, it's definitely max your fire and lightning, because those two are incredibly dangerous now. So I am only level 77, so I do not have any high nightmare dungeons to show you guys, but I am pretty confident, for obvious reasons, that everything will work and you'll easily clear your T100s, Ubers with this build. So I'm going to share with you the D4 build link in the video as is. This is what you're seeing in the background here. So let's go ahead and start with our skills to show everyone what we're currently working with. And for the most part, it's just your typical generic Twist and Blade skill tree, but I still want to go over it for everybody, including possible new players and for people who just aren't familiar with Rogue. So we take Puncture as our basic skill into Fundamental for our frontal cone vulnerability infliction. We take Max Twisting Blades obviously into Advanced Twisting Blades just to help with some cooldowns here and there. If you're bossing, like Uber bossing, definitely go Improved Twisting Blades because it will still stagger or add to the stagger bar. 3 points in the Sturdy for 12% close damage reduction, 3 points in the Siphoning Strikes. We take Shadow Step. This is our source of Unstoppable. We go Enhanced Shadow Step for when we do Shadow Step to a target, we get 8% crit strike chance against that target for 3 seconds. 3 points in the Weapon Mastery. We opt to use Swords for Rogue as our main hand, which without anything on our amulet, it would be times 9% increased damage. With our amulet that has +3 weapon mastery on it, you would go up to X 18%. We take Dash for mobility. We take 1 point into concussive. After knocking back or knocking down an enemy, we gain increased crit strike chance against them for 3 seconds. We take 1 point in the trick attacks. When we critically strike a dazed enemy, they are knocked down for 0.5 seconds. If you are wondering what benefit we have for trick attacks, it's through Smoke Grenade. This is our primary source and only source to daze a target. Now, we don't even put this on our bar. We actually proc this through an aspect. And because we proc it, we also take Enhanced Smoke Grenade, which enemies affected by Smoke Grenade not only will be dazed, but they will take X 25% increased damage from us. Point into Poison Trap, which Poison Traps do knock down enemies, which then procs our concussive. We go into Counter in Poison Trap. When we activate a Poison Trap, we have a chance to reset our imbuement skills. 3 points in the Exploit. We deal X 18% increased damage to healthy and injured enemies, healthy being 80% or more HP, injured 35% or less. We max out our Poison Imbuement. We go into Blended Poison Imbuement. Critical strikes with Poison Imbued skills deal 75% increased poison damage. 3 points in the Precision Imbuement for the 9% increased critical strike chance with our imbued skills. We take 1 point into Deadly Venom, which is just a prereq, but it also grants 3% increased poison damage. Every little bit, I guess, helps. Debilitating Toxins, we take 2 points. Poison enemies deal 10% less damage. Alchemical Advantage, we get 1% increased attack speed for each enemy we've poisoned up to 15%. 3 points into Frigid Finesse. This is only if you have Penitent Greaves. If you do not have Penitent Greaves, do not take Frigid Finesse because we have no other way to chill or freeze enemies. We take 2 points into Innervation. Gives us a lucky hit modifier up to 20% chance to gain 8 energy. If we do not have Penitent Greaves, we would take a 3rd point into Debilitating Toxins, a 3rd point into Innervation, and then another point into haste. We take 3 points into trap mastery. When we activate a poison trap, we get 12% increased crit strike chance against vulnerable and crowd controlled enemies for 4 seconds. And the 3 points that we would normally spend on malice, but we opted not to in this build, we would spend it on adrenaline rush. While moving, we gain 15% increased energy regeneration. And then the 1 point into haste if we don't have Penitent Greaves. Again, while we're at or above 50% max energy, we gain increased movement speed. While below 50% max energy, we gain attack speed. And for our Keystone passive, we take momentum. We generate momentum stacks when we hit a stunned, dazed, or frozen enemy, or hit an enemy from behind. While we're at 3 stacks, we gain another 20% damage reduction, 30% energy regeneration, and 15% movement speed. Now let's go ahead and go over our aspects and recommended affixes to look for, as I have provided those on the D4 build website. So first and foremost, I left out Uber Uniques. I know they are much more obtainable in Season 2, but I still don't feel comfortable applying them in any of my builds because all of these are made with the intentions that we'll never see one. It's sad, but it's realistic. Anyways, I mentioned this earlier. For our helmet, we're running Quickening Fog. I know they're much more. We're running Quickening Fog. I love this aspect. At the end of your dash, you drop the smoke grenade. We took Enhanced Smoke Grenade, so all enemies hit by smoke grenade will be dazed and take X 25% damage. For our affixes, you can see them right underneath the aspect. We opt to take basic skill attack speed, max life, total armor, and the 4th open affix, definitely take a resistance. I didn't add just any random resistance. Base it off of what you need in your build. And if you don't care about the basic skill attack speed, this is purely just a little quality of life thing, actually, just for combo point generation. You can roll double resistance, max life, and total armor. For chest, we run Aspect of Might. Basic skills grant 20% damage reduction for 2 to 6 seconds. We're almost always going to have this up because we're always going to be generating with puncture. For our affixes, you are looking for damage reduction from close enemies, max life, and total armor. If you want, you can drop max life to slot in a resistance. For gloves, we're rolling Edge Masters. Skills deal up to 10 to 20% increased damage based on your available primary resource when you cast it. Our 3 affixes that we're looking for: attack speed, crit chance, ranks of Twisting Blade. These are a must-have. For your 4th, you can't roll resistances on gloves, so I would probably just opt to either get all stats or a lucky hit chance. For our pants, we're running Aspect of Stolen Vigor. Each stack of Momentum Keystone passive heals us for X life per second. Here we are opting to choose max life, damage reduction from close enemies, and damage reduction, and a resistance slot. I definitely recommend either having a max life roll, if not on both, on one or the other, on your chest or pants. Our boots of choice are again Penitent Greaves in the build. If you do not have Penitent Greaves, or if you do want to just run an additional aspect, run Ravagers or Ghostwalkers. They're both good options. Look for triple resistance plus movement speed if you opt not to use the penitence. For our ranged weapon, we still actually opt to use the crossbow as a vulnerable implicit still stacks for our additive. For bows, we just don't have any use for distant damage additives for Twisting Blades. We run Accelerate and Aspect for more attack speed when we crit with our core skills. And for our affixes, we do look for core skill damage, damage to close enemies, dexterity, and crit strike damage. Really what you're looking for when it comes to the additives on weapons now are just the higher values. And of course, since it's a two-hand weapon, you absolutely want dex for your main stat, since you'll always have between, I think, 90 to 116 or 156 rather. For our amulet, we still run Disobedience. Disobedience, even though it's been changed again, is still just one of those defensive aspects that are just a must-have, I feel, in every build. You gain a stacking % increased armor for 4 seconds when we deal any form of damage, which means it also procs with our poison ticks. For our amulet, you are looking again for damage reduction from close enemies, and ranks of weapon mastery passive, because as I stated earlier, this turns our X 9% with our sword main hand increased damage to an X 18%. For your 4th affix, I personally like looking for movement speed, but you can really just run whatever you want here. Ring number 1, Blade Dancer's Aspect. This is a must-have for Twisting Blade. You need to slot in Blade Dancer somewhere. This allows us to have our twirling blades. For rings, you are absolutely looking for increased crit strike chance. Prioritize that firstly. Secondly, max life, and then your additives afterwards. So damage to close enemies, conditionals like damage to chill the enemies, which if you run Penitent, you're always chilling, so it really isn't a conditional. But again, same thing applies for weapons to rings. You are looking for your highest amount of additives now. Before the damage bucket changes, you would just look for vulnerable, you would just look for crit damage. It is different now. For ring number 2, I personally want to try Corroded Signet. I want to see if it's worth using. Corroded Signet is a new unique. Lucky Hit, your damage over time effects, which are poison, have a 50% chance to erupt, dealing 5 to 6 damage of the same type to nearby enemies. Again, I just want to know if this is worth using. If not, you are just going to use the Ravenous aspect, which allows you, when you kill a vulnerable target, you get more energy regen for 4 seconds. And then the same affix priority as ring number 1, obviously. Melee weapons, ignore the dagger in the first slot. Again, you want swords as your primary in your first slot to activate your weapon mastery passive, but Ashira's dagger is just really good. It's the attack speed that makes this weapon worthwhile. Attack speed with twisting blades, it's too good not to use. And yes, I do think it's better than Condemnation Dagger, but if you don't have Ashira's dagger and you do have Condemnation is still a great dagger. If you don't have either of them, use a Rapid temporarily just for the quality of life combo point generation, and look for the same on both of these weapons. The affixes, all stats, core skill damage, damage to close enemies, and one more massive additive bonus. For your second melee weapon, you're looking for the Expectant. This attacking enemies with basic skill increases the damage of your next core skill by 5 to 10%, up to 30%. So again, we're always spamming basic skills. This is just a buff, a stackable buff that buffs our next Twisting Blade. All right, so now we're gonna go over and take a look at our Paragon. So the way that we approach, or the way that I approach Paragon here now, is a bit different than what I would normally do. Again, this is to prioritize resistances, armor, and damage reduction, and you can see just where we started in the beginning on the very first starting board. So first starting board, we are taking Closer like we normally do in my builds. This increases our cutthroat skills, and the additional bonus when met, which we do meet, is 10% reduced damage when wielding a melee weapon. The difference here is that we actually decide to take these nodes on the bottom left here. We are getting the resistance to all elements and all of these max life nodes. And because it's a starting board, we get the benefit of the bonus. So this will be 6% resistance to all elements. For our second board, we come up to Cunning. In here, we slot in Exploit. We do not need more than 25 points. We just want to meet the bonus so we can have the Exploit anytime we damage an enemy. They become vulnerable. But we do want to take full advantage of these nodes around it, like Finisher and Lawless, which again, since it's our second board, you will be meeting these eventually, these bonuses. So this becomes 200 armor. This becomes 28% core skill damage instead of 14%. And 100 armor. From here, we come over to the left, we take Dominant, which is more core skill damage, which when met, the bonus, it doubles it again, goes up to another 28% core skill. And we come up here to grab Denial. Denial is another armor and resistance to all elements node. When met with the bonus, we get another 3%, so this caps out at 6% resist all, plus all the minor ones, which gives us another 4.5 resist all. Third board, Tricks to the Trade, and we go with the Bane glyph, which increases our poison damage. Additional bonus, poison damage effects have 10% chance to deal double the amount over their duration. We do opt to take every strength node inside to just increase the amount of poison damage. We also take the damage to elite node. We take Lawless, which is just more armor, Eventually, you will be meeting these bonuses too, so 32% damage to elites and another 200 armor. We do also take Tricks of the Trade legendary node, Marksman skill, Puncture, grants our next Cutthroat skill, which is Twisting Blades, X 25% damage. We come up top and we do take Brawler. Again, we'll be meeting the bonuses, which will, as base, it's 12% damage to close enemies, 4.5% damage reduction from close enemies, and then we can double the damage to close enemies when we meet the bonus. And then we take the minor nodes, which is an extra 4.4% damage reduction from close enemies. We go into our fourth board, which is No Witnesses. This is where we choose to use the Diminish rune. What this does is grants the surrounding rare nodes within range an extra bonus, and when we meet the bonus of the glyph, we take 10% reduced physical damage from vulnerable enemies. The two glyphs that we're boosting here are Knowledge, which is 10% damage, and Training, which is max life. And then if you do happen to meet these requirements for the bonuses, you can expect 20% damage and 8% max life. From here, we are heading to the right and taking Cheap Shot. This is where we slot in Tracker. We also take the Cheap Shot legendary node, dealing 5% X damage for each nearby enemy that's crowd controlled, up to X 25%. On our way here to the center where we slot in Tracker, we take Safeguard, which is damage reduction from elites and armor. And in the glyph area, we do take Devious, which is damage to crowd controlled enemies. And here we do take every intelligence node because Tracker does increase our damage to poison targets. The bonus is poison damage effects last 33% longer. For our sixth and final board, we take Eldritch. We come over and we slot in Turf just for increased damage to close enemies, and we gain, when we meet the bonus, we gain 15% more damage reduction against close enemies. And we come up here to take Potent for the imbued skill damage, mainly just to get the 7 strength node. We want as much out of this as we can, so we take every single strength node in the Turf. And that's it for the guide. I'll leave you guys an amazing tier 24 nightmare dungeon showcasing my godly damage. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Diablo 4 related content. I'll be working on updating all of my rogue builds for season 2. And until next time, amigos, take care.